Okay, we'll call our meeting to order for the Lake Dallas Independent School District Board of Trustees meeting for June 19th, 2023. We have all members of the board present, so we do have a quorum established. And if you would, we'll start off, and if you'd join me in a moment of silence, please. Okay, thank you. And now we will have our pledges of allegiance. Do we have somebody leading that for us? I see some young ladies coming this way.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you very much for joining us in that. Our next item is our staff report and recognitions, first of which is Texas Department of Agriculture Administrative Review.
Yes, thank you. Just a brief word, and Mr. Eversole is here, but I did want to take the opportunity to compliment the work of our Food Services Department and the leadership that has been evident there. I know that it's not such a beautifully run department, and such a remarkable accomplishment in an audit does not happen without extreme attention to detail. And I'm very, very pleased to be able to invite Mr. Eversole to share some more details and the significant accomplishments of Stephanie Reese.
Thank you, Dr. Rue. Good evening, President Stacy, board members, and Dr. Rue as well. I'd like to ask Stephanie, Ms. Reese, to come up here. You mind? So this spring, the Child Nutrition Department underwent an administrative review by TDA, Texas Department of Agriculture. It took 2 months. This is something that happens every 4 years, I think. Every 4 years. And so they go through a procurement review, a resource management review, they review all our free and reduced applications, meal counting and claiming, meal patterning, dietary specifications, record keeping, professional standards, and food safety. And our Child Nutrition Department, with Stephanie's guidance, received a no finding administrative review report, which is their highest threshold, highest level. And so I want to congratulate Ms. Reese and the Child Nutrition Department for achieving compliance in all areas in the food service program. And we appreciate their hard work and your hard work and dedication to feed our kids each and every day. So congratulations. So Commissioner Sid Miller has sent us a Certificate of Achievement Award that he has signed, and so I'd like to hand this to you and appreciate everything that you've done for us.
My refrigerator, right?
Yes, it's on your refrigerator. So are we gonna do? Oh yeah. Pictures?
We're going to get some pictures? All right. All right, our next item is our executive session. The open session of the meeting will adjourn. The Board of Trustees will reconvene in the executive session pursuant to one or more of the sections of the Texas Open Meetings Act, Chapter 551 of the Texas Government Code. The Board of Trustees will reconvene in open session to take any final action, decision, or vote on a matter deliberated in executive session, and it is 5:38. It is 6:26, and we are back in open session. First item is public comment. We have nobody signed up for public comment. Our next item will be our trustee reports. We'll start down here with Ms. McKinley.
All right, so good evening, everyone. Just want to say again, thank you, Mr. Caldwell, for your time, for your service, for all the great things that you brought to the district. You're going to be missed, but we wish you well on your next journey. To everybody else, especially those who are participating in summer school and keeping that up and going for our students, thank you for all the extra time or the time that you give to our students, and I hope that that is going well for you guys. For all the coaches, I had a brief moment to talk to Coach Young, and I guess we're no longer calling him Young. Has he been here long enough where it's just him, that he's just one Young? He's still Young. Okay, so I got to talk to him briefly, and he talked about the camps and how well they're going for him for football, and so I just think that's great, and it's amazing. I know basketball is starting, and usually we have just a plethora of things for the students to do, and it's really good. I appreciate all that to keep our students busy and something to do in the summertime and something to look forward to. So again, thank you guys for all of your hard work, everything that you do for our students and how you pour into them, and for our teachers and our staff. We are foreverly thankful and grateful for each and every one of you.
Mr. Appleby.
I also want to thank Randall Caldwell for your years of service, and I've enjoyed just the short time I've gotten to know you and wish you the best of luck. I also want to thank Dr. Karen Rue for your steady hand these last 2 months, and we appreciate your service to our community as well.
And I'll piggyback off Aaron. Thank you, Randall, for everything you've done, not just in the school district, but in the community. You're awesome. So, and Dr. Rue, thank you for what you've done.
It's been my pleasure.
All right, Mr. Baird.
I echo the same sentiment. Randall, we'll miss you, buddy. Dr. Rue, we appreciate it. You got us from point A to point B. Looking forward to Dr. Brown. Very excited about that. And big things coming. And thanks to you two guys especially. Thanks.
Mr. Smith.
So great to see our staff get recognized for all their hard work. I mean, we get to see students, but also to get to see staff is very enjoyable as well. I saved mine for this one, Mr. Caldwell. So instead of back there, it's mix of emotion. The only constant that we have in our lives is change. And been here a while, got to know you. You've been great to me and my family. We appreciate you. You've been a pillar in this community, the school district. You'll be greatly missed. You've left quite a legacy here. Dr. Rue, thank you for all your help and guiding us with your time here. We appreciate you. Thank you so much.
My turn.
Yes,
You
it's your
didn't
turn.
call me, so just making sure.
Ms. Collier,
Thank
do you
you.
have any comments?
Thank you. Well, I mean, I already said to Randall, and again, man, it's hard. I'm going to miss you. But I understand there will be a cabin someday that I can come visit, and I'll be gladly come visit you and do the dinosaur tracks. I look forward to that. And Dr. Rue, again, thank you so much for this transition. You have just been a joy to be around, and we really appreciate you stepping in and helping us through this whole process. So we thank you. And I know there's a lot of summer still going on, but I hope some of you are still getting some rest that you need during this summer.
Dr. Rue, I'd like to thank you. You thought I was going to talk about you, didn't you? Dr. Rue, thanks for all you've done. I really do appreciate it. Keep yourself available for Team of 8, because that's an excuse to bring her back, y'all. So I always make the suggestion for her. Always. Thank you again. And Randall, who is going to call me 50 times during the middle of a varsity game while we're running the scoreboard? Who? He calls me 30 times, but you call me 50 times. No. But no, I appreciate you. Everything you've done for all these kids. I could say specifically my kid. I know all you did for him. He would even go so far as to show up to take his Saturday, bring all his kids, and watch my kid, and all his buddies that also went to school under Randall, and watch them play basketball. I mean, that's the kind of guy Randall is. I'm not telling anybody anything they don't already know, but that's what Glen Rose is getting, and they're lucky. I appreciate you, buddy. Thanks, ma'am. All right. Our next item is our superintendent report, and I will say your name, Dr. Rue.
Well,
It is
you
your
very
turn.
much. Thank you very much. And I do want to thank each of you for allowing me the opportunity to work with you and with all of them. You have a magnificent district with such a bright future, and I'm excited for you and for your new superintendent. It has been a joy and a pleasure to work with these fine leaders and with each of you. So thank you for that. I want to introduce someone who has joined your Falcons First family, and that's Ashley Valdez. She's your new Director of Communications, and you may, Ashley, just wave a little higher. There she is. You saw her taking photographs earlier, and you saw samples of her work as I shared that with you. You will enjoy what she adds and brings to your district. So you have several band members, about 16 band members who annually, when it's possible, they participate in a European tour and performance, and they're off right now with, and I've seen some of the pictures that are posted on the LD band post. That's amazing. I ran into a friend of mine whose daughter is in that group right now, and she was just bragging about all the good things they were doing. So I'm proud of them. Your barbecue team is at the national competition being held in Hutto. They cooked today. The judging is tomorrow. They're at the Texas State Technical College in Hutto. So perhaps we'll have good news to share with you. If nothing else, the good news is they qualified. They're there, and they are representing LD with pride. I always told my sons who ran track, both of them did, said, you come in second, your nickname isn't Pokey, unless, of course, you're the last kid in the group. That's a whole other story. Which, never mind, I'm tickled myself on that. So, okay. And then summer school's going on, and it's doing well. We want to thank our summer school principals. We're proud of all of the work that's happening there. And at your seats, you have a copy, just an update that I just wanted you to have on House Bill 3. It's the mandatory safety and security bill that was passed. It gives you some details about what you will be looking at, as it will every district in the state. Also, Senate Bill 838 and Senate Bill 2069. One of those is the silent panic alarm that must be installed in every classroom in the district. So just giving you some updates, something light reading when you need something to read. You've got it. And that's it.
Thank you, Dr. Rue. Our next item is our consent agenda. Those routine items that can be handled in one single motion or at one time. Do I have any question or comment regarding consent agenda? If not, I will entertain a motion. Motion to approve by Mr. Tucker. Do I have a second?
I second.
A second by Mr. Smith. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor, please indicate. And that's unanimous. Thank you. Our next item, or action items, the first of which is the budget update and consideration or approval or consideration/approval of 2023-2024 compensation package. Mr. Eversole.
Thank you, Mr. Stacy. First of all, before we get into the budget planning presentation, I would just like to echo the remarks that board members made concerning Dr. Rue. She's been here for 2 months and certainly guided us through the transition. You were very available. You were out and about. You got to know people mighty quick, and so we appreciate all your guidance and the time of effort that you spent with us, getting us through the transition.
Well,
So,
thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So tonight we'll continue our discussions concerning the upcoming budget. Okay, so tonight, June 19th, we're going to give you a budget update. We're going to talk about compensation. and give you a recommendation. We're going to be reviewing some campus and department budgets, and get through probably about half the department budgets this evening. Next board meeting, we'll give you another budget update, give you a good look at the rest of the departmental budgets. We'll give you a good feel, hopefully, of the general fund budget, the food service budget, and the debt service budget. We're about 80%, I think, in the process of completing the general fund budget right now. And so we hope to give you a more accurate look as information becomes available by July 17th. Certified tax values, that's on or before July 25th. And then we will have 2 meetings in August, one to give you a final budget update and review. We'll review some federal programs, and then come back and ask the board to adopt the budget. And if we have legislation by that time, we'll ask to adopt the tax rate. We can actually go through September, current law, but last year we adopted the tax rate in August. And so if we're able to do that, we will recommend doing that in August. Okay, so key budget factors for the 23-24 school year. So since we met, they finished, went through sine die and finished the legislative session. They did pass a budget, but they did not pass a school funding formula for school districts to utilize. And so without, in absence of them approving a new formula, we're forced to go back and use the current law formula that was generated in 2019. So we're going on 60, 2 sessions, I guess, since that was passed. We were super optimistic. The state was sitting on $32 billion worth of surplus, and we saw all sorts of bills out there that would help us with increasing the basic allotment, which would increase funding for school districts. We've absolutely had some inflationary pressures, as y'all well know. There's numbers out there that have been shared that the current basic allotment is $61.60 per ADA, and there's numbers out there to just maintain our purchasing power. That basic allotment would have to go up $900, and as of right now, we're at $61.60, no change. Just to kind of give you a feel, if they increased it $500, maybe not $900, but $500, that would cost the state $7.2 billion out of the $32 billion. If they went up $1,000, easy math, that's $14.4 billion out of the $32 billion. So right now we don't have a new funding system, and that's kind of where we are now. They are in a special session right now, but that's property tax relief. And so we don't expect there'll be a funding bill coming out of that, the current special session. I think they're kind of locked in to determine what their property tax relief was or is. So that's kind of where we are. Under current law, the TEA will compress our tax rate. So once our certified values become our certified values, we will enter the information into a TEA template, and TEA will determine what our new tax rate is. Again, property value growth no longer impacts the general fund. So as property values increase, state fund decreases. Does affect and impact our debt service fund, but it has no material effect to the general fund. So as it's been for a while, attendance and enrollment fund our school district. Okay, so the number of kids that walk in the front door each and every day, that's how we're funded. Property values are not material as far as the calculation goes. And so we're funded based on our enrollment and attendance, and we're also based on our student needs, special populations. So all the different special populations, different weights, we've talked about that, and that's a component of our funding. Okay, So tonight we'll be reviewing campus budgets, all 5 campus budgets. We've included the health service budget, the athletic budget, and the band budget. And so the elementary allocation, we are an allocation system based on the number of students projected and the type of, or the number of special population students that are enrolled in each one of our campuses. And so, so that allocation at the elementary level funds and purchases instructional and office supplies, reading, library materials, counseling, testing, supplies, routine equipment repair, print shop expenditures, staff development, replacing capital outlay items to a small degree, postage, field trip, other costs, other travel costs, and fees and dues. And so essentially the nuts and bolts of maintaining an elementary campus. The middle school includes all those expenditures, but on top of that, they've got choir, they've got drama, increased supply needs for some of the electives that we have at the middle school, increased student travel cost, cheerleading, career and technology. Career and technology became a component, I guess, last session, and so we do generate career and tech dollars and have several career and tech classes at the middle school, and then increased costs associated with UIL competition. And then the high school includes all those expenditures that we've discussed, but additional vocational expenses, this is where the majority of our vocational dollars go. Drill team, auditorium expenses, increased costs associated with UIL and other co-curricular expenses, costs associated with the additional class electives that we have at the high school. They also fund homecoming, graduation, end of the year academic related banquets, rose cutting. That all comes out of the high school budget. So these are expenditures, campus expenditures that are budgeted by either centrally or by other departments. And so salary and benefits, we budget that centrally. That's not in the campus budget. Athletic expenditures, the athletic department has their own budget, which we'll talk about in just a second. Custodial, maintenance supplies is at a facility. Obviously food service, we recognize Ms. Reese today, is its own fund. IT, telephones, technology, we've centralized the copier contract, we pay that centrally, and band supplies, they have their own band budget. So this is our allocation, and we have not changed the amount allocated per student in many years, okay? So we've had inflation, we've had pressure on our budgets, but we have not changed these allocations. And so, these are the allocations that their budgets are based on, the additional allocations for our special populations. And so we are funded as a district, we are funded a little bit more for each of these 5 special populations. And so we pass some of those costs and some of that revenue into the campus budgets to meet their needs. Okay, health service budget, services the needs of almost 4,000 students. We have 5 fully functional clinics, and so this pays for their supplies, audiometers, AD replacements to some extent, CPR training to staff. The band budget, Ms. Kennedy says we're up to, I think, 407 students that are pre-enrolled right now. That's, I think, about 15 more than we had this time last year. That will change, but as it stands right now, that's a healthy number of students in the middle school and high school program. So this includes band supplies, miscellaneous travel costs, fees, dues, that type of thing. And our athletic budget supports 11 sports both at the middle school and the high school. Expenditures for officials, and that has gone up. That has gone up each and every year, and we have no say-so in the cost of that. That cost is given to us. Athletic supplies, travel, other fees and dues, costs associated with 3 full-time trainer and over 1,000 high school and middle school athletes. So this kind of gives you a feel for a comparison of our 22-23 budget in these particular departments and campuses and the 23-24 budget. And so, can see the high schools is pretty similar to last year's. Not a big change. Middle school's the same way. You see a decrease at Lake Dallas Elementary. We saw, as we talked about in Dermaga's report, we've actually had a couple, I think, conversations with the board about. Our attendance or our enrollment did go down this year at Lake Dallas Elementary School, and so you'll see the allocation has gone down proportionately. Corinth and Shady Shores were about the same, not a dramatic difference. Health service budget, we were able to maintain the budget of last year. Well, the board did approve some AEDs, to purchase some AEDs, and we appreciate that. And so that will be, those will be purchased and disseminated in our campuses. And in the band budget, Ms. Kennedy was able to keep her budget the same, and the board did approve some instrument purchase today during your consent, and we appreciate that. And then athletics, there is an increase, a projected increase in the athletics budget. And even though a small portion of this is supplies, the majority of it is for uniform replacement, I think at the middle school, Coach Ed. And so that money is in there to replace some needed uniforms at the middle school. So our taxable values, this is a little bit less taxable value number than we presented last time, but these are preliminary. So as we go through this season, these numbers will go down based on the protest. And so DCAT is having, again, another record year in protests this year. And so, so we will see this number decrease based on the results of those meetings, those protests, and we'll give you a better feel for ultimately what the taxable value will be in our next board meeting, and then certainly they'll be certified on the 25th. So, but right now we're looking at a 26% increase, which is a historic increase for the school district, and you're seeing similar increases throughout North Texas. So this is our first look at our general fund revenue for the upcoming school year. We had a $40.57 million revenue budget for the 22-23 school year. That was based on about 100 more students than what showed up first day of school. Okay, so we've talked about that. We did see some enrollment decline this year, and so our ultimate revenue that we will receive from the state will be less than the $12.7 million. We were able to mitigate a fair amount of that by interest revenue. Interest rates this time last year were less than 1%. We're yielding 5.25 to almost 5.5% on our funds right now. So that's a huge increase, and so that's mitigating a lot of the loss in state revenue. And so, and then the federal programs number, the federal revenue, that's SHARS and impact aid, which we're going to go into detail the next meeting. But this is our first glance. So, so we see local revenue increasing because the tax values are increasing. We see state revenue decreasing because as tax values increase, state revenue decreases. Also, this is based on our projections next year, which is flat enrollment. And so around 3,900 students is our projections right now. And then we're projecting a little bit less in SHARS revenue, and we'll go into detail next meeting about the details on that. So we're looking at an estimated $971,000 increase in revenue going into the next school year. Again, the majority of that is interest revenue. So that's somewhat good news. So our next thing that we'd like to talk about and present to the school board is our compensation package. And so the district engaged TASB HR services to come in and look at our compensation. And so Zach Hobbs is here. He's been working with us for a little bit, going through the details, and so he'd like to present a proposed compensation system, and this is, the proposition is going to a midpoint system, which is very, very common for school districts. And so, so this is a system that I would venture to say most school districts utilize. And so, so that being said, I'll ask Zach to come up here and step you through the pay system review.
Thank you, Wes. Good evening. First, I want to say thanks to these three folks here. They've been very diligent trying to understand the pay system that we're recommending and get a handle on what they would be administering and managing going forward. And so we've had a lot of phone conversations, a lot of virtual meetings, and you guys are in good hands with them. They've got a good handle on this, and I'm still here to support as well going forward. But the goal tonight is to share findings from our review of the pay system and salaries here in Lake Dallas ISD and recommendations for the school district going forward. So that's the goal for tonight. I'm going to start by just talking through the process that we went through, and then giving a little bit of overview of the type of pay system that we recommend to districts, and then I'll dig into Lake Dallas ISD specifics. So starting out the process, we began with a planning session with district administration, and that included collecting data from the district. So that planning session was talking about goals from the review of what we wanted to accomplish, concerns with the current pay system that was in place and things that might need to be addressed, and then obviously collecting that data, which included payroll data, job titles, experience data, even job descriptions for some jobs if we needed further clarification of what their duties are. From there, we conduct a market pay review. So we recommend a market-based pay system, which means that you pay individuals based on their market value or their value out in the marketplace, and I'll talk more about that here in a minute. So the market pay review consists of gathering market data and matching jobs in Lake Dallas ISD with like jobs out in the marketplace and showing how salaries compare out in the market. We use that market pay review data to build models for improvement. So we build a compensation plan for the district. We look at inequities both internally and externally. So internal inequities, we'll be looking at jobs or individuals that are working the same job and maybe some difference in pay rates if they needed to be adjusted. External inequities would be looking at pay rates in Lake Dallas ISD and how they compare to the marketplace and providing recommendations for adjustments there. So that's a little overview of the process that took place. Obviously, there's a lot more involved in that, but that's just a big picture of what happens. Four things that I want you to think about as we go through this are these four objectives of the pay system. So these are things that we're trying to accomplish with the pay system that we recommend to the district. And in no certain order, I'm going to start at the top left, recruiting employees. So recruiting employees is essentially accomplished by having a competitive pay structure. Your structure determines the hiring rates for new hires coming into the district. And so if you have a pay structure that's competitive with the market for those specific jobs, then the new hire rates are going to be competitive, and it's going to allow you to attract quality employees and paying them for the experience that they bring in the position. And so that's one objective of the pay system, and that's something we tried to accomplish with setting competitive pay structures. Moving down to the bottom left, another objective is retaining employees. Retention of employees involves a whole lot of things. But when we're just talking about compensation, that is typically accomplished through regular general pay increases. So giving regular general pay increases to employees and improving their pay each year for their year of service to the district. There's obviously other things that can be involved: retention, culture, leadership, things like that. But right now we're just focusing on the pay system. So giving regular general pay increases is going to help with the retention of staff. Moving to the top right, paying for the job value. I spoke to this already. We recommend a market-based pay system. This system is going to allow you to pay for the value of that job out in the marketplace. It's going to control pay around the value of that job out in the marketplace. A couple reasons why that's important is, well, one, it's going to help with recruiting and retention because you're paying a competitive salary for those jobs, and you're competing with other districts and other organizations for the same job. But a couple other things that it does, it prevents overpayment and underpayment. That's really important, especially for school districts. Underpayment, if you're underpaying for jobs, you're going to have retention issues. Staff are going to leave if they're not being paid appropriately. They're going to go find a job somewhere else where they can make more money. So that's an issue. So we want to try to correct any underpayment. Overpayment is another concern. As you know, you deal with public funds, just as Wes was talking about. So when you're dealing with public funds, you want to make sure that you're good stewards of those funds. If you're overpaying an individual for the job they're providing to the district, you're not being good stewards of public funds. And so we want to make sure we're controlling pay around the market value for those jobs. And that's an objective of the pay system. And last but not least is controlling cost. As a board, you're responsible for adopting the budget each year. You need to make sure that you can sustain the compensation plan and the salaries for the district within your budget. And so we recommend that your salary plan and increases are driven by your budget. And the system we put in place is easier to budget for. It's easier to project those pay increases and to be able to determine if your budget will support it. This just gives an example of what the pay system looks like that we develop. So this is not Lake Dallas ISD's pay system, but it's just an example. What we do is we look at individual jobs and we group those jobs based on skills, responsibilities, accountability, and market value. And they go within the same pay grade. So jobs that are similar in scope, similar in market value, go within the same pay grade. And then we create a hierarchy or career pathway from there. So higher level jobs with more skill, more responsibility, higher market values are going to be in a higher pay grade. And so I've just got an example here of a pay structure with 4 pay grades. So it's a very small example. In pay grade 1, you would have lower level jobs that are similar. Pay grade 2 would be jobs that are a little bit more advanced, and so on and so forth. Within the pay grades, we have control points, and those 3 control points include a minimum rate, a midpoint rate, and a maximum rate. So once we group the jobs, from there we determine those control points. We start with that midpoint rate, and the goal is to align that midpoint rate as close as we can to market values for those jobs in that pay grade. So we look at the jobs within pay grade 1 that are similar in scope, responsibility, market value, and we try to align that midpoint with the market rates for those jobs. From there, we determine the minimum and the maximum rate for those jobs within that pay grade so that those hiring rates are competitive. We look at minimum values out in the marketplace and we set that minimum appropriately. So a new position or new person coming into that position with no experience would come in at a competitive rate. So that's very important as we set the pay structure, and using the market data and the market analysis helps us to do that. So now moving on to the specifics of Lake Dallas ISD. As I said, we recommend a market-based pay system. So first we have to create a market. This is the market that we created for the district. So there's 17 districts here that we included in the market. That's a great sample set. So the more data, the better. And so these are districts that are neighbors to Lake Dallas ISD. So these are districts you compete with for staff, for the majority of your staff anyway. You're going to compete with your neighbors. Most positions within a school district are not going to pick up and move across the state. They're going to stay local. However, where you will see a variance there is upper level positions at central administration. They may pick up and move their family for the right position. And so there are some variances there. And that leads to some other things I want to point out in this peer group. You can see that there are a lot of districts in this peer group that are significantly larger than Lake Dallas ISD. I think out of the 17, somewhere around 6 of the 17 or so are, I would say, close to your size. So the majority of them are significantly larger. That's it's a fairly unique situation, but I work with a lot of districts that are in that situation. So it's a small district within the metropolitan area surrounded by larger districts. It does create some obstacles, for lack of a better word, and I'll talk through some of those obstacles here in a minute. But it's important to note that when we're comparing jobs at Lake Dallas ISD to this peer group, a lot of these districts are much larger. For some of those jobs, it doesn't really matter. The job is what it is. Doesn't matter how big the district is. For other jobs, it does matter. And typically, that's your upper level jobs. If you think about your upper level jobs at some of these small districts compared to, say, a Frisco or a Louisville to the larger districts, you're going to see higher market rates for those upper level jobs at those larger districts. And so that's going to impact what we need to do for Lake Dallas ISD and what we want to do to be competitive. And so I'll talk through that here in a minute. Some other things we use in our market analysis is private sector data. And so we pulled some private sector data for the Dallas metropolitan area from these two sources. So we contract out with the Economic Research Institute and Comp Analyst. So to kind of back up, TASB HR Services does an annual salary survey of districts across the state. Every year we conduct a salary survey. We collect data for over 160 jobs within school districts. These two organizations do the same thing in the private sector. So we can pull data for private sector jobs and see what the pay rates are for those out in the private sector. That's important for jobs that compete in the private sector. You know, think of some of your support staff, your maintenance staff. A lot of those positions can compete out in the private sector. Nowadays, even teachers, we're struggling with them leaving to go to the private sector. So it's important to look at private sector data as well, and we pull that in when it's available and when necessary. I always like to start and just give an overview of the demographics for your teachers. Teachers make up the majority of your staff. I tell district administration to look at this regularly because it can show you some patterns and trends. You can see what teachers are leaving the district, what teachers are coming to the district, but this just gives you a snapshot of the teacher demographics in Lake Dallas ISD for this past school year. What I want to point out is you have a very diverse group of experience level across the district. That's a great thing. So there wasn't anything too alarming here. This looks pretty typical. And so I was very impressed with just the diversity here. A couple things that you want to keep an eye on as a district is that you don't have too many teachers that are brand new to the district. That can lead to turnover sometimes, those that aren't sure if they want to stay in the profession or not. You don't really have a big issue here. And the other thing you want to keep an eye on are those that are getting up there around the 30-year mark or higher because they're eligible for retirement. And they could retire at any point in time. And you want to make sure you have a handle on how many that might be each year so that you can replace those as needed. So that's an important thing to keep an eye on there. But this is a great distribution of staff. The other thing that I like to look at with districts is looking at your new hires for the current year. So for this past school year, these were your new hires, the demographics of your new hires. I had 59 staff members that reported as new hires that fell into the teachers, librarians, and nurses group. Of that group, 41% were brand new to the profession. It's not an unusual thing to see the majority of your new hires to be brand new to the profession, especially when you're in a metropolitan area and you're getting those coming straight out of colleges and universities that are within the area. They're not having to move. They can come out of the college, university, and join a district. But you were able to attract some experience level too. And so again, I thought this was a great distribution. There's times when I'll see this graph, 75% of it or more would be 0 years experience. And that can be tough when you're bringing in all brand new teachers. So bringing in some experience is very important. But again, it's good to look at this annually to see patterns and trends. Okay, so digging into the market analysis, let's start with your teachers here. Again, they make up the largest group of your employees. If we look at your teachers, this is a graphical representation. I'll show you the numbers behind this in a minute, and I'll explain what this means. So the orange line represents Lake Dallas ISD salaries. The blue line represents the local market median. Let me give you a little background of where this came from. So we survey for 5 points on the teacher salary schedule each year from districts across the state. We survey at the 0, 5, 10, 15, and 20-year marks off teacher salary schedules, and then we just connect the lines to make a trend line. So obviously, we're showing Lake Dallas ISD's salary schedule in the orange. The median comes from taking those 17 peer districts and ranking them in order from highest to lowest in the salaries, and then finding the middle value. So what that means is half the districts are paying above that blue line, half the districts are paying below that blue line. And you can see where Lake Dallas ISD falls. So your salaries aren't far off the middle at the beginning part of the schedule, but then you start falling further behind the median. You start falling further down within that group of peer districts as you move further down the experience level. So it just kind of gives you a picture of where your salaries fall compared to the group. Here's the numbers behind that. So if you're more of a numbers person versus visual, it just gives you the same information. I've got those 5-year marks across the top. I added in a column for average salary. You can see Lake Dallas ISD salary on the top row, the local market median on the second row, and then I show you your percent comparison to the median. So at starting salary, you're 98% of the market median, or 2% below the market median. That comes out to $1,385 below the median value. And so you can see how salaries start to get further away from the median value as you move down the experience level. It goes to 97%, 95%, 93%, and then stays at 93% at 20 years. So you can kind of see some areas where adjustments need to be made to the salary schedule that might be able to help with the retention of some of those staff with experience, and also help with recruitment down the road. For our other groups, so our non-teaching groups, I'm starting with your exempt staff, and these are salaried individuals. So these are your professional staff, and then we'll look at your hourly staff here in a second. But I did something a little bit different with Lake Dallas ISD, and I do this quite often when I'm dealing with districts similar to this situation, where it's a small district surrounded by a lot of large districts, as I spoke about. I showed your central administration staff compared to 2 different peer groups. The first line shows your central administration. I want you to think about director level and above positions here at central office, comparing them to districts of similar size across the state. So looking at districts that are comparable to the size of Lake Dallas ISD, and I'm looking at student enrollment when I'm considering size. I looked at districts with enrollment between 3,500 and 6,500 students. So you're kind of at the bottom end of that range, but that's the enrollment I looked at. When I looked at that group of peer districts of similar size, I matched 14 different jobs out in the marketplace. Pay for these individuals is 106% of the market median for those jobs. So all 14 jobs in aggregate, they're 6% above market. That doesn't mean everybody's 6% above market. That means those 14 jobs in aggregate are. Some of those jobs are below market median, some of them are above, but if we look at them on average, they're at 6% above. If I compare those same 14 jobs to the 17 peer districts in your local area, those same 14 jobs are 82% of market. That's a huge difference. And so here's what's driving that. There's 2 things driving that. One is the significant number of districts in your peer group that are much larger, and they're driving a higher market rate for those jobs, those upper level jobs. Those jobs have bigger departments. They just bring more money in the marketplace. And I get in this argument a lot of times, well, a smaller district, they have to wear more hats. I agree. But at larger districts, the responsibility is more, they're overseeing more people, and the market value drives that. And that's what we're looking at, is market value. So when we look at these 14 districts in your local peer group, there's a lot of them that are significantly larger. Plus, the other piece of that is, compared to the districts of similar size across the state, that's not taking into account your geographic location in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. Cost of living is higher here than it is in rural Texas. And so that first group, districts of similar size, is pulling all the way across the state. It is pulling some other districts like you in the DFW Metroplex, Austin, Houston, but it's also pulling rural districts where the cost of living is lower and the market value for those jobs is lower. So there's a significant difference there. Now here's how we use that. We use that we used both of those data points to set the pay ranges appropriately. And so we're trying to set pay ranges that are competitive with what those jobs actually do, but also competitive with your geographic location and to be competitive with your peers in this area. So there was some strategy involved there of setting those pay ranges for those groups. And so I just want you to understand we took both those things into consideration there. For your campus administration, we looked at just your local peer groups. So this is principals and assistant principals, and you can argue that, well, bigger districts, they're going to pay more. Most of the time, campuses are the same size. It doesn't matter how big the district is, with few exceptions. You know, Allen ISD, they're always going to have a huge high school and one high school. So there's some few exceptions there. But for the most part, a campus principal and assistant principal, the job's the same, and the campuses are about the same size. It doesn't matter how big the district is. And when we use median values, that throws out the outliers. So if you have an outlier, it does throw that outlier out, and it doesn't skew the results very much. So we're confident using that data there. And also those positions, for the most part, are not going to move across the state as much as your central admin jobs are. They're going to stay local, and so you want to compete locally. But they're 92% of market overall. Your professional positions, these are going to be counselors, special education, support staff, coordinators, those type of positions. We matched 20 jobs out of that group, and they're 92% of market as well. So you can see that the pay is a little bit low for all groups, our teachers and for these groups, and we want to try to make some corrections going forward to improve that over time. For your other groups, these are your hourly staff. I broke them out into 3 different groups to look at. You've got your clerical and technical support, so these are going to be clerical support staff, and technical support could be like your clerks within the business office, some of those type of positions, or even computer type positions. They are 100% of market median overall. We matched 14 jobs, so that means overall they're right there aligned with market. Again, that doesn't mean everybody is, but for the most part, pay is competitive for those jobs. So that's something positive to look at. Those jobs are being paid well in Lake Dallas ISD. If you look at your instructional support, these are your classroom aides. In any setting, it could be general education, special education, working in the library, but these are classroom assistants. They are 98% of market. We matched 5 jobs there. Again, another positive thing. That's fairly competitive at just 2% below market median. Your auxiliary staff, this is going to be food service, maintenance, custodial, transportation, those type of positions. We matched 19 jobs here. You can see this was the lowest of the group at 90% of market median overall. Okay, so that's a little overview of what we found. Now I'm going to talk about the recommendations. So the first recommendation is to address that first objective, and that's recruiting employees. So it's setting a pay structure that's competitive. So we're recommending to adopt the proposed pay structure to improve your market and internal equity. And I noticed this when I was reviewing this when I got here. I do have a typo on this slide, and I apologize. Where it says 4 midpoint-based structures, it should be 3. And I'll explain what that means. So we're recommending a teacher salary schedule, and I have developed 2 different teacher salary schedules for you guys to consider for budget purposes. And then we're recommending 3 midpoint-based pay structures. Those 3 midpoint-based pay structures, one is for your administrative professional staff, and that consists of 9 pay grades. And so remember that picture I showed you before with the 4? This would be 9 pay grades for those staff members. The second midpoint-based structure is for your clerical paraprofessional staff. So that's going to be clerical support and your instructional support, your classroom aides. And there's 7 pay grades for those positions. And we're getting your starting rates up to $15 an hour for those in pay grade 1. So that's a competitive starting rate for those classroom aides. For the third structure is your auxiliary staff, and that's all your maintenance, custodial, child nutrition. It's consisting of 7 pay grades, and we're getting your starting rates up to $14 an hour for those entry-level positions. So we're trying to put those pay structures in a competitive place with what we're seeing out in the marketplace. So recommendation 1 is adopting the structure we put in place. Recommendation 2 is addressing the retention of staff, adopting a general pay increase for your staff. This is a little bit different than what y'all have done in the past, and so I want to explain this a little bit. We presented two models to help you with budgeting. The first model is a 2% general pay increase. The second model is a 3% general pay increase. That ties back to the two salary schedules we developed. One salary schedule is based on giving your teachers a 2% increase. The second salary schedule is based on the 3% increase. So for your teachers, the general pay increase is based on the percentage of the market median teacher salary. For y'all, that is $62,927. So that's the market median teacher salary in your peer group. So if we take 2% of that and we round it to a nice clean number, every continuing teacher under Model 1 would get a $1,250 increase. They would all get the same dollar amount. So every teacher would get a $1,250 increase under Model 1. Under Model 2, again, we use that market median teacher salary of $62,927, and we take 3% of that. We round it to a nice clean number. That comes out to $1,900. So under Model 2, every returning teacher will get a $1,900 increase. So they all get the same increase. For your non-teaching pay groups, they get a percent of the midpoint of their pay range. So remember, we group jobs within a pay grade. We set that midpoint to market value. So we're modeling the same thing we did for teachers. For teachers, we gave percent of the market value. We're going to do the same thing for the other staff. They're going to get a percent of the midpoint, which represents the market value for their job. So everyone in pay grade 1 will get the same dollar amount increase. Everyone in pay grade 2 will get the same dollar amount increase. So they get a percent of the midpoint of their pay grade. It's not a percent of salary. That's a very different thing. I'll explain why. There's rationale behind why we want to do this. Think back to some of our objectives. We want to pay for the job value, and we want to control cost. We want to prevent underpayment and overpayment. If you give everyone a percent of the midpoint, those individuals that are at the very bottom of the pay grade, down around the minimum, are going to get a larger percent of their salary than those that are up around the maximum. So under a 2% model, if you give 2% of the midpoint, an individual that's down around the minimum may get a 2.1, 2.2% of their salary. An individual that's up by the maximum may only get a 1.9% of their salary. They're going to get the same dollar amount. What that does is it escalates those that are being paid significantly below market to the market rate faster during their career. Essentially, they'll hit market rate about 2 years faster than if you're giving pay as a percent of salary. They're going to hit that midpoint about 2 years faster on average. Those that are above the midpoint are going to get a smaller percent of salary. They're not going to move away from the market as fast. So you're controlling that pay around the market value. You're preventing underpayment and you're preventing overpayment, and you're controlling costs better. So everyone gets the same dollar amount within that pay grade. For budgeting, it's much easier. Everyone in that pay grade gets the same amount increase. So it's much easier to budget for. Same with your teachers. It's much easier to budget for. You don't have to figure out a percent of salaries. So it's easier to make projections if you know how many staff members are within each pay grade and what you're looking at for a percentage increase. So it helps accomplish all of those objectives we talked about at the beginning. But it is a different philosophy, and so just want to explain what that means.
Excuse me, Mr. Hobbs, very quickly, would you mind, and I don't know where you have it here, you will address the adjustments.
Yes, ma'am.
That make for this year that somewhat different, because we've talked about the desire to move our staff into that competitive pay range, which offsets some of what you just mentioned.
Yes, ma'am. Good. Thank you. Good segue. That's the next recommendation. So we set the pay structure. We provide a general pay increase. Now we look and see, do we have any issues that we need to address, any inequities that we need to address. We start with external inequities, so market issues, jobs that are paid significantly below market, and then we look at internal inequities. And so here's some adjustments that we're recommending to address some of those things, and I'll explain what they each mean. The first adjustment is an increase to 1% above minimum. Here's what that means. When we set those pay ranges and we grouped jobs within the pay grades, there were some individuals who were being paid below the minimum value. So I talked about we got the pay grade 1 of our classroom aides up to $15 minimum. There were some individuals that fell below that. We don't want to have individuals below the minimum. We're underpaying for their job considerably. So we want to make an adjustment to get them above the minimum. So after we've placed them in the pay grade, we gave the general pay increase. If they're still below, we are going to make another adjustment to get them the 1% above the minimum. The reason we go to 1% above is because if you hire a new staff member in next year with 0 years of experience doing the same job, you don't want them to come in making the same as a returning staff member. A returning staff member would be above them. So we take them to 1% above. So there's going to be some individuals that are going to get increases significantly above the general pay increase to get them up closer to market rates and within an appropriate range from market. So that's one thing that happened. Another adjustment we made is we call it teacher pay equity adjustments, and I'll explain what that means. That's for your administrative professional staff for positions that are required to go through the teacher career pathway, that are required to have a teacher certification. Easy examples to think of are counselors, assistant principals, and principals. They're required to have taught, and they must have a teacher certification before they can move into those other roles. We look at their daily rates in their current job, and we compare to what their daily rate would be on the new proposed teacher schedule for their years of experience. So take a counselor. I'll just use easy example. You take an elementary counselor who's got 10 years of experience. We look at that individual's daily rate. We look at what the daily rate would be at 10 years on the teacher schedule, and we make an adjustment to move them to, I want to make sure I'm saying this right, to 3% above the teacher daily rate. We want that to be viewed as a promotion and a career pathway for teachers. And so if they're making below 3% above the teacher daily rate, they're going to get an adjustment to 3% above their teacher daily rate. So there are some individuals that may get an adjustment above the general pay increase for that. So those are two adjustments we made. The third adjustment also addressed your administrative professional staff. And I just called it a strategic adjustment. What I looked at individuals within your administrative professional group, and for any individuals who have more than 5 years of experience and are still more than 10% below the midpoint, they're going to get an additional 1% of the midpoint on top of the general pay increase. So let's explain what that means and what it's trying to accomplish. They have more than 5 years of experience, so they've been in the job for a little while. They've been doing that job for a little while, at least 5 years. And they're still significantly below the midpoint, more than 10% below the midpoint. Remember, that midpoint represents market value for that job. Again, let's just use that counselor as an example. Counselor, 10 years of experience. Let's say that they're paid 12% below the midpoint. That's significantly below the market value for that counseling job. So they're going to get the general pay increase plus another 1% of the midpoint on top of that. So under the 2% model, they'd get a 3% of the midpoint. Under the 3% model, they'd get a 4% of the midpoint. So that's to help move individuals that are still significantly below midpoint with some years of experience up closer to market rate a little bit faster. So that was the third adjustment. The fourth adjustment addressed your clerical paraprofessional group and your auxiliary group. We call these placement scale adjustments. It kind of ties into that first bullet of increasing individuals to minimum. So when we set those pay structures, we place the jobs within the pay structure. If they fall below, we adjust them up to minimum. We could have an issue where we have a bunch of employees stacked right at 1% above the minimum with a variety of years of experience. So I'll use your classroom aides for example. If we had several classroom aides below the minimum, we adjust them to 1% above the minimum. Now we have 20 classroom aides making the same rate, and they have different levels of experience. That's not a good thing. We want to address that issue. So what we did was we applied what we call placement scale adjustments, and we spread those staff out based on their years of experience within the new pay grade. Essentially, we spread them out over a 15-year period between the minimum and the midpoint. So we created 15 increments from the minimum to the midpoint, and we placed them based on their years of experience. So it values their years of experience throughout that pay range. And so that addressed some inequities there. So there's a lot of adjustments, and you're going to see this in the cost here in a minute. There's a lot of adjustments happening behind the scenes that are helping to address where we saw some low rates compared to market value. And so that's going to help some of those areas that we found. All right, recommendation 4. So I'll read this and then I'll explain it. It says, improve pay equity and budget management by implementing strong pay discipline for employees paid above the maximum of their assigned pay grade. So we talked about those below minimum. Well, what about those above maximum? And so I'm going to give you compensation philosophy first, and then I'll talk about real life. So compensation philosophy says that you shouldn't give pay increases to those above maximum. They're already paid way above market rates. They're outside the pay range. They've been paid above market rates. They shouldn't get a pay increase. In real life, do we really want to do that to our employees? And so this is up to the district to decide what they want to do. I'm going to talk to you about some options you can consider. One option, and probably the most common among districts, is just give them the general pay increase that everyone else gets and let them stay above maximum and move on with life. Another option is give them a reduced general pay increase. So say you adopt a 3%, maybe they get a 1 or a 2 or 1.5, whatever you wanted to do there, and that would keep them from continuing to move too far away from the maximum. A third option is you could give them a one-time payment equal to what the general pay increase would be, and that would keep their pay rate the same as it is, but you value their year of experience. So it keeps them from moving further away from the maximum. What you would hope over time is you would adjust your pay ranges, and I'm going to talk about this here in a minute. You would adjust your pay ranges to keep up with market, and over time you would hope you would catch those individuals, right? Or as most of the time they have a lot of years of experience, as they retire, you hire in someone new within the pay range, and the problem takes care of itself through attrition over time. But that's something the district needs to determine how they want to handle those above maximum. So I'm just sharing that with you. Any questions about that? All right, recommendation 5 is to adopt this market-based approach to pay planning that we're recommending. Adopt this approach going forward. So what that means is that for your teachers, you rebuild this teacher schedule each year based on the general pay increase that you adopt. So whatever general pay increase you adopt, you increase that schedule by that amount, and that's your new salary schedule for the next year. And you make that a % of what the market median teacher salary is. That's the general pay increase for your teachers. For your non-teachers, you use the midpoint-based pay schedule and align it with market values. So what that means is you're making sure your structures are keeping pace with market. You're adjusting those ranges, those midpoints, regularly to keep up with what market values are doing. So you're staying competitive. Market's going to move. It's moved a lot the past few years, as you guys know. And so you want to make sure your structure's moving with that market. And then you grant pay increases as a % of the midpoint of the pay range. So that's adopting the strategy that TASB recommends. So that's recommendation 5, is to adopt that strategy, that if you adopt this pay plan, you need to adopt this strategy going forward. And recommendation 6 is kind of some housekeeping, is annually review the district compensation plan and update as needed to maintain market competitiveness. So this means looking at the market, adjusting those pay ranges accordingly to stay competitive. TASB has resources to help with that. You can run salary survey reports and see what the market's doing for jobs and adjust as needed. But you want to make sure that you're doing that annually so that you do stay competitive. And then last but not least is looking at the cost models here. So this is an overview of the 2% model. The way I have this laid out is I have your 4 pay groups: your teachers, your administrative professional, clerical and technical, and your auxiliary staff. And then I show the cost for the general pay increase, the cost for all the adjustments, and then the total cost. And so what I want to point out here is that the adjustments are significant. So this is a 2% general pay increase model. You can see the general pay increase comes out to 2.1%. The reason it's more than 2% is because the majority of your staff are below midpoint. So they're getting a larger % of salary than 2%. So it comes out to 2.1%. but it's roughly $637,000 impact, increase in cost. But look at the adjustments, they're significant. It's almost 2% in adjustments. So the total impact under the 2% model is a 4.1% impact. But we felt like that those adjustments were necessary. You can see where most of the adjustments are. The teachers are getting a lot. I didn't really talk about that much. Along with the general pay increase for your teachers, we applied some additional adjustments in some years where you were very low to market, and that's what that roughly $50,000 is doing. We're getting your salaries up more competitive in those later years where you were below market. And then you can see your auxiliary staff has some significant adjustments there. That was the group that was the lowest to market, and we wanted to make some adjustments there.
And I'll reiterate, for those two categories, teacher and auxiliary, those were the ones that were lagging further behind in the market in pay scales. So those adjustments represent not just the pay increase, but the ability to move closer to the competitive market that we live in, that you must compete teachers in.
So kind of the way to think about this big picture, and thanks Dr. Rue for that, is that under this model, everyone is going to get at least a 2% general pay increase, but the majority of staff are going to get larger increases than that. And the amount of the increase is really dependent on how low the individual is being paid to market, is a good way to think about it. The further away from market you are, the more increase that individual is going to get to try to get them closer to market. So that's kind of a big picture way to think about it.
I think you can consider this like a reset, setting a very rational, structured salary scale that you annually review, and about every 4-ish years, having the intensive TASB study again to see if there's been any flattening of the scale or a creep that needs to be corrected.
And then the next slide is the 3% model. So the second model we provided, what you'll see is the general pay increase came out to 3.2%, almost $1 million. The adjustments are 1.6% to $480,000. What you're going to see is as your general pay increase goes up, your adjustments are going to go down. It's inverse relationship, because we apply the general pay increase first, and then we apply adjustments as needed. So if you give everyone a larger general pay increase, you don't need as many adjustments typically. So you're typically going to see an inverse relationship there. But still, under the 3% model, 4.8% impact overall. All right. That is the end of my presentation. Any questions from the board before I turn it back over to Wes?
Thanks, sir. Are there any questions? Mr. Baird?
When you were referring to auxiliary, are you talking about hourly?
Yes, those are hourly staff. So, so example would be like a director of maintenance or director of transportation. They would fall under the administrative professional group. Correct.
And so those percentages would be based on that hourly number
Yes, sir.
versus salary?
Yes, sir. We look at hourly rates for those positions. That's correct. So we're comparing hourly rates for your food service workers in Lake Dallas ISD to the hourly rates out in the marketplace for those same jobs. Yes, sir.
For example, you mentioned earlier that transportation was like at 90%, so that they would see a bigger increase.
Correct.
Okay.
And you can see that here where the adjustments for the auxiliary staff are significant. The cost impact for the auxiliary staff are significant. We're trying to address those. Yes, sir.
Any other questions?
I have a question. I'm trying to flip through the PowerPoint that I have in front of me, but as I was looking at, correct me if I'm wrong, the pay for like the bus drivers, it looked like the minimum was actually less than what we have advertised, like the signs that we have around the district. Can anybody tell me if am I right or wrong on that? Because I think I saw like 16, but aren't our signs like 19, 18, something like that we have?
Well, Mr. Stinson here can tell us what the rate is.
I think we're starting out at $19.10. So if we need to make a modification, we'll absolutely do that.
Okay, yeah, because that was one of the things that I did note, the signs and what I saw on here. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Collier.
I'm showing we've got the The proposed plan is at 1925. Yes, ma'am, for bus drivers. So if y'all are advertising 1910, then we should be above that.
Ms. Collier?
Yeah, so explain to me again how you said this was different when you said on the 3%, every teacher would be getting the same pay raise of $1,900. So every one of our teachers are gonna say, we're gonna give you a raise, but you're all getting the same, 1,900, correct?
In general, yes, there are some adjustments.
Right, so we're doing 1,900 across the board, boom, first.
Yes, ma'am.
Then we're going back and adjusting the market value. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, ma'am. So if you think about this graph here, we're gonna try to address these areas where they're furthest from market. So $1,900 would move that line the same amount across the board. And what we wanna do is try to get you closer to market where you're further from market. So some of your experienced teachers are gonna get adjustments above and beyond that. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So similar to what we're doing in other groups, we're giving adjustments to those that are further from market. Same concept with the teachers. We're gonna adjust those that are further from market with some additional adjustments above and beyond the general pay increase.
Okay, but you said it was different than what we've done in the past. But
In the past, I believe y'all have given a percent of salary, and so now we're talking about a percent of midpoint. That's what I was
Okay.
referring to. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
So just to clarify, so let's do the 20-year teacher. That's the biggest gap, or the second biggest gap, right? So that teacher would get $1,900 plus 1% above the 66?
No, not just 1%. So the 1% strategic adjustment I was talking about was for your administrative professional
Okay.
staff. So for your teachers, it varies based on the experience level that they're at. But just to kind of give you an idea, starting at around 10 or 11 years of experience, the adjustments grow significantly. I mean, we've got some teachers that could see under the 3% model. You've got teachers that could get a $1,900 increase and adjustments as much as $1,200, $1,300, $1,400 above that $1,900.
Okay.
Okay, any other?
Yeah.
Ms. Smith?
All right, the blue line is the midpoint of all the 17 schools that you picked that
Correct.
surround us.
Out of this group that we looked at right here.
Right.
Yes, sir.
And looking at that, majority of those schools are larger than us. So
Mhm.
therefore, we can assume that their revenue is more than ours. So can we ever make an adjustment to the 17 and, I guess, compare us, us being a 4A to other 4A schools within the Metroplex itself?
You can, but I
Or-
wouldn't
Not that
recommend
many.
it because it doesn't matter what revenue is. You're competing with these districts for staff. Doesn't matter what the revenue is. Just like you're competing with Buc-ee's and Chick-fil-A for staff, and their revenue is significantly higher than Lake Dallas ISD. So it doesn't matter what the revenue is. Your competition are these districts, and so you need to know what these districts are paying so that you can adjust accordingly. Now, does that mean you're ever gonna pay as much as some of these districts? Probably not, but you need to get within striking distance. And that's where other things come into play that I was talking about with retention, culture, leadership. Those are things, small town feel, those are important and can be beneficial, but your pay has to be within striking distance. You are not gonna keep staff here if you're paying significantly below these other districts. But if you're paying just a little bit below, you might be able to keep some staff. And so we've got to work on the pay so that we can be within striking distance and then let all those other things help keep individuals here and attract individuals. But yeah, I get what you're saying. You're right. The revenue's different, but you still compete with them for staff.
We compete with them because we know we have lost staff to them too.
Exactly.
That's how we know who our competitors are, not just who's in our general vicinity.
Exactly,
So,
yep.
yeah.
Yeah, there's, this group was determined with input from the district too.
Mhm.
I started out with a group and I said, all right, give me your input, who do we want to take off, add, and we modified it based on, looking at data, so yes.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
Good observations
Okay.
and questions.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, Zach and I had a philosophical difference of opinion on Friday when he said revenue doesn't matter. But we kind of met in the middle.
It's all about perspective, isn't it?
Right, it's all about perspective. But so Ms. Hahn, I think, is just handing out to y'all our current teacher salary schedule. Okay, so this is the 22-23, not the 23-24. But over a period of time, we absolutely have a horizontal salary scale, and so that's what this study and this compensation plan tries to correct a little bit. Now, it does cost money for sure, but Zach's right. We are competing against these school districts for personnel, and we're in a unique area where we've talked about this many times, we're a school district of 4,000 students that are right next to Denton ISD that has 32,000, and Louisville that has, 50,000. And so they're able to gain some efficiencies based on those numbers, there's a high school in Louisville is the size of our whole school district. And so they can have scheduling efficiencies at the high school that we can't get that efficient. But that being said, we absolutely feel like we can become more efficient in what we're doing. And we hope over a period of time that's will help defray the cost of bringing us up to a market-driven system. And this is something that we've dealt with, forever. We've always been a small school district in the Metroplex. And I think last year we shared with you a graph that showed when you compare our school district to school districts of like size, we pay very well. But we're not competing against, as Zach mentioned, those rural school districts. And so anyway, that's a major reason why we entertained this study and asked for this review. So, and I stepped out for just a second, so pardon me if Zach went over this.
He did.
So the 2% model, with a general pay increase and adjustments, 1.2 million, that's gross pay, okay? And so that doesn't include any of the benefits that are generated, the cost of Medicare that we match, teacher retirement, we match a portion of teacher retirement. So this is specifically gross pay. And I'm sure he mentioned to you that the estimated percentage increase of this 2% model is a little over 4%. And then the cost model for a 3% plus adjustments is in the neighborhood of 5%. And so that's pretty substantial, but I think it's absolutely needed. We struggle in certain areas getting staff, and this is a component of it. And I think this would put us in a more competitive arena. We're looking at Little Elm, specifically real close to us is Little Elm, Argyle, and Denton, and Louisville. And so that's our major competitors, and they all pay a little bit more than we do. And so, but I just did want to point that out, that those were gross pay, and then we would add benefits onto that. So this is just a rough estimate of the cost of each one of these plans, and what the increase or decrease would be to our fund balance. And so based on, well, first of all, let me backtrack. The 22-23 budget, 40.5 million, expenditures 41.2 million. So we adopted a $712,000 deficit. I think I shared with you earlier that we feel like we've mitigated most, if not all of that by the end of the year. We still have several months left and several things we have to deal with expenditure-wise, but we feel like we're gonna bring that down pretty sharply. A 2% increase with the estimated revenue of 41.5 and the estimated expenditures of 42.1 will give us a $603,000 deficit. Now, these are estimations. I'll tell you for certain. That revenue estimate will change and the expenditure estimate will change. So this is kind of where we are with 2 months left in our budget cycle. That 3% increase, we're looking at a deficit of $836,000. Now, as your CFO, I don't like red numbers. But at the same time, sadly, we're in a position where we are not getting additional funds from the state right now. Now, keep our fingers crossed, you know, maybe another special session or two. They'll get that mitigated, but right now we are estimating our revenue based on current law. And so that's what it is. When I look at my counterparts and talk to our counterparts, not only our neighbors, but all across the Metroplex, almost everyone is adopting a deficit budget. We're all in the same position because we're all funded the same way, same funding system. And so that's the circumstance that we're in right now. And as inflation has hit, wage inflation has hit as well. And so we're competing not only with public schools, but the private sector as well. And so this just puts us in a little bit better space to recruit the people that we need. So next month, we're going to come back to this here in just a second, but just a preview of next month. Hopefully we'll give you another legislative update. We'll see. That's another month from now, so hopefully we'll have some good news. The general fund revenue, we'll give you another estimation on our general fund revenue. Pending legislation, we'll see what happens. We'll go over the remaining departmental budgets, and then we'll give you a little bit better feel for where we are on the general fund budget. We'll give you a look at the child nutrition budget and the debt service budget. We need to get closer to the certified values before we get into detail on the debt service budget, because values do affect debt service. So, in addition to compensation that we talked about tonight, we'll be talking next month about fuel increases and insurance. Insurance is going up. And then we have the cost of inflation with the repairs to our facilities, supplies, technology. The appraisal district has an increased budget, which we bear a portion of that. So at any rate, so that's kind of where we are. We tonight are recommending the 3% model, and we've shared with you our estimations of what that looks like. Again, that will change, but hopefully that's in the ballpark. If the board approves a plan this evening, as Zach mentioned, the initial computation of salary is relatively complicated, and TASB is going to work with us to get those salaries. And then once you get to a midpoint system, then it's relatively easy for a school district to manage it because you're not going through those dramatic adjustments. Now, you know, we could look at this, we could look at adjustments next year, or we could look at adjustments, continue to look at adjustments down the road. This is not necessarily a one-time thing, so the district can look at that as needed. But once this compensation plan, if the board approves it, is calculated, then it's relatively easy for the school district to manage a pay plan. So our recommendation is a 3% increase as presented this evening. I'll be happy to answer any other, or Zach will be happy to answer any other questions you may have.
Zach just stepped out of the room.
Oh, okay.
But he'll be back, I saw him.
Hey, Wes, your 22-23 budget, 712. What areas are you making that up in?
Yeah, so we did a budget amendment last board meeting to reflect a budget increase of investment revenue.
Okay.
And so I think we set our budget based on 50 basis points or 1/2 of 1% interest revenue, and we're happy to have it at the time. And like I said earlier, we have laddered out our investments. So when interest rates started going up, we started laddering our investments. And so we're laddered out through November right now. And my last investment, I think last week, was at 5.4%. And so a dramatic change from the 0.5% that we had. And so that mitigates, for the most part, our decrease in student enrollment. And then, in addition to that, we've had some positions that we have not filled. We've had some positions, we had some positions that we budgeted that we did not fill. We also had positions that have left, we have people that have left the district, and we have not, some of those we have not filled as well. So we're going to see some savings there as well. And then some of the ESSER funds, which we're going to talk about next meeting, has helped out the general fund this year.
But ESSER's, we're done with ESSER funds now?
So we have one more year of ESSER next
Okay.
year. Of ESSER 3, we have multiple ESSERs. But for ESSER 3, the majority of the funding, put it this way, the majority of ESSER funding will be completed next year. And so we're going to use that as a strategy, hopefully, to help some of those numbers out, and those will be baked in here in just a little, next month we'll share that with you.
Thank you.
So.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, go ahead. I was gonna suggest, this is the old pay scale, and being my wife's a teacher, and being around teachers, they never could figure out, the principals, back me up here a little bit, they never could figure out why their raise didn't include this simple, you're supposed to get to 3% and this. They never could figure that out. My point is, and I know that's real easy to understand, but as I watched Bruce's eyes glaze over while Zach was talking, I would suggest
Kind of like mine are with you right now.
there be some type of a training process or opportunity for these teachers, because when you throw this out there on them, of course I won't have to deal with it, but you guys will. They're going to go crazy. And so if they had some type of training opportunity or a session of some sort, it may solve a lot of carrying on, to be quite honest.
Yeah, so I think you're right, Mr. Baird. This is a complicated adjustment process. It's a fair and equitable compensation adjustment process, but it is complicated. As you can see, what Zach described, he's looking at a whole bunch of different moving pieces, okay? And this method that TASB uses is tried and true. They do this all the time. And so that initial adjustment will be complicated. You're going to have teachers that are below, a lot lower of market value some other teachers. And so the thought is that we try to bring everybody up as close to market value as we can afford to, okay? And then you can see we have a very horizontal salary schedule until you hit, what's it? Around pay step, 27 or so. Well, even below that. But the tail end is kind of tails up a little bit. But these increases will not only, these adjustments will not only be for teachers, they'll be for other staff members as well, okay? And so we are absolutely going to rely on TASB to calculate those numbers for us. And but once we get beyond this cycle, then it will be based on the midpoint and be relatively easy for people to understand what their increase is.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate that, just explaining this well to our staff. Because I know there's always a lot of confusion on what is the real 3% increase and all of that. And then the other things that he went through, like recommendation 3, recommendation 4, is that something we don't vote on tonight? Or is it something
Those
we go
are all
back and revisit?
Those
or
are all
what is that?
administrative
To y'all?
recommendations as
Gotcha.
part of the plan.
Okay.
That's correct. And,
Okay.
and we agree with all those. And so those are,
Right.
so if you adopt it, those
You-
specific recommendations are administrative recommendations.
And is stipends, are they in addition?
So this study did not look at stipends. We're going to be reviewing stipends next year.
Okay. Okay, anyone else?
Yeah, so my question is that with all the different changes from the legislator, and some of the expenditures that it looks like we're going to have to come out of with this panic button, potentially officers at each campus, those kind of things. How do you build that in? I mean, you're the numbers person. I'm sure you've looked at this, but that's going to change your red down there, right? When we add all of that in. But even with that and knowing that, your recommendation is still the 3%? Okay.
Yeah, we still have some things to digest, and to be honest with you, we're going to have some decisions we may need to make down the road. But this is about 84% of our budget right here. Salary and benefits are 84% of our budget, and so there's some things that we're going to have to look at. There's some efficiencies that we're going to have to gain, not only this current school year, but going into next year, which we're absolutely willing to do. But in absence of this, then I think we'll have a harder time to get the best and the brightest out there. And we feel like we have a good story to sell. We absolutely do. And so this gives our department heads and our principals just a little more leverage to get the best and brightest.
All right. Any other questions or comments?
I do. Okay, this is just so complicated. Kudos to you doing this all the time. Okay, so, like, on the pay scale you gave us, the 22-23, the paper that you just gave us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then if you look at the chart, the 3% increase. So are you saying a 15-year teacher currently in our district, or is this new hire? So like a 15-year district is currently making $59,680.
That's correct.
But with the new paper over here, if we do the second option, they'd be getting $62,250.
Yeah, I'm not looking at that second one, but
Right.
that would be an increment in steps. So you're looking at pay step 15 here. You
Right.
go to pay step 16. So if you're looking at pay step 16, what that salary is would be what they would be making.
So a
next year.
15-year teacher would, in essence, be getting a $2,570 pay raise. Is that what we're saying? Not that 1,900.
That's correct. So
because you've made it out in the chart for us.
Right, that's the $1,900 increment.
Correct. You've already adjusted it.
Plus the
Okay.
adjustment. Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
I like that.
Okay, any other questions or comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Ginger's worn off on me. I make a motion to approve.
Make a motion to approve. Are you recommending the 3% general pay
3%.
increase and including all the staff adjustments as well?
Yes.
Okay. So I have a motion for Mr. Smith to provide 3% general pay increase for all staff, including adjustments as presented. Do I have a second?
A second.
I have a second by Ms. Collier. Is there any further questions? If not, all those in favor of approval, please indicate. That's unanimous. Thank you. Awesome. Very awesome. All right.
And,
All right.
and I will speak for those who are not applauding in the audience. I want you to know.
I'm
that-
applauding on the inside.
That your administrative staff, your teachers will appreciate you very much for your work tonight.
Been a long time.
Randall,
coming.
will you stay now?
It's going to be a long commute from Glen Rose, won't it? All right, we'll move on to our next item, which is a TASB Board Region 11 Position C nomination.
You have the opportunity, should you choose to do so, to nominate someone perhaps from this board to serve in that position. I'll remind you that Justin Chapa, who is a board member with Arlington ISD, currently holds that seat. It's a 3-year term, and he does intend to run again. But yes, if you choose to, you would need to do it tonight because the nomination must be received by TASB no later than June 30th.
All right, do I have any questions or comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion on this item.
I move to not nominate anybody tonight.
So moved. Justin Chapa with Arlington ISD, once again, he's the current and he intends to run again. Is that who you intend to nominate? Yeah, okay. All right. So I have a motion to nominate Justin Chapa from Mr. Appleby. Do I have a second? I have a second by Mr. Tucker, a very silent second. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor of approval, please indicate. And that's unanimous. All right, thank you. Our next item is consideration approval of SHAC recommendation for instruction relating to prevention of child abuse, family violence, dating violence, and sex trafficking. Mr. Monica.
Hello,
Good to see you.
afternoon. Dr. Rue, Board of Trustees, good evening. My presentation will be just a little shorter than Wes and Zach's, so.
Bet.
I'm just kidding.
Already heard it once. That's right.
So yes, last month, the SHAC, Student Health Achievement, oh gosh, now I gotta go to my slide. Student Health Advisory Council made a recommendation for a health education program relating to prevention of child abuse, family violence, dating violence, and sex trafficking. So tonight we're asking the board to take action on that recommendation. I won't go through in the entire details of this information because we gave this to you last month as well, but I will hit some of the highlights and some things to bring back to your attention. The first being, while we're here, EHAA Local charges the SHAC committee to bring a recommendation to the board, and that is what they have done last month. We're actually to take action on that. We have met 4 times over the past school year. The last 2 of those meetings being specifically about this health program. So they vetted and researched the programs, got to experience it firsthand, and see exactly what our students would see. Came to a conclusion. They even had a rubric to evaluate each program with to come to the consensus on a vote. So the recommendation from SHAC is that we go with the North Texas Child Advocacy Center, and the grade levels that they would present these education programs to would be PK through 12. One important factor to point out here, this is a opt-in only program, meaning a child only experiences this education program if a parent or guardian gives consent and signs a release form for that child to do so. Another couple highlights, North Texas Child Advocacy Center is a nonprofit, so it is no cost to the district. One important fact from the advisory council was that all the curriculum, the videos, all the presentations delivered to students are available to parents online, so they can vet these presentations and the programs beforehand. Also, they will come out to the district and present these firsthand to parents that choose to see it. So a parent can experience the program for their child specifically and then make an educated decision on whether they want to opt in or not. And you can see here the 4 programs. They actually tailor it specifically for an age group. So you can see the 4 different age groups there based on grade level. So it is appropriate for the grade level and the age of that child. And again, our recommendation from SHAC Committee Council is that the North Texas Child Advocacy Center presents this program as an opt-in program for students PK through 12.
Thanks, sir. Is there any questions or comments regarding this item? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Well, I have a question. So is this going to be presented during the school day, or is this like some special session after school
No,
hours?
it will be during the school day. Yes.
Okay, any other questions or comments? And I'll entertain a motion then.
You get better buttons. I'll make a motion, we accept the SHAC recommendation as presented.
Okay, a motion to approve
I second.
by Mr. Baird and a second from Ms. McKinley. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor of approval, please indicate. And that passes 7-0, unanimous. Thank you. Move on to our future discussion items, the first of which is student code of conduct.
I'm back. So yes, typically this time of year, board, we are bringing you our student code of conduct as well as our student handbooks for review and revision, so you can see a summary of changes. Being a legislative year, we are waiting on the guidance and revisions from TASB. So the timeline for that, in mid-July, TASB will release a model student code of conduct that we can model ours after and seek their guidance on. And from that, we'll also tailor and make sure our student handbooks are up to code and meeting the compliance that the state and legislative has set. So like I said, typically we're bringing that to you now, but we are a little behind since this legislative session. Those are in the process. We just, again, want to seek that guidance, especially with all the law changes, before we bring it to you or make it public. So again, just an information item. The goal is, or the hope is, that in our next board meeting in July, we'll be bringing you those revisions and bringing you a summary of changes so you can see the changes to those documents.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Nope. Thanks, sir. Appreciate it. Our next item is a TASB Update 121.
Yes, and this is strictly a future item for you to bring to your attention that the TASB update will be coming before the board for its first hearing at your meeting in July, excuse me.
Very nice. All right. Thank you. Our next items are information items, the first of which is a legislative update.
Well, I did that already, didn't I? I do get it out of order. I apologize.
That's okay.
Maybe if I stuck around another 3 or 4 months, I'd actually not put things out of order for you.
Will you volunteer, like
Well,
unpaid volunteer, maybe?
There we go. Yeah. So yes, there will be several items coming up. I will say this: the special sessions have not addressed funding for public education, and I am an optimistic person. However, I do not feel optimistic about any future sessions really addressing much in the way of public education. There is a desire to tie school vouchers with any additional dollars flowing to public education, and there is a very definite disconnect between what the House is willing to do and the Senate is willing to do. That may resolve itself, and I would be, cheering tremendously if that does happen. I just think that we do the type of diligent work that Wes has done and his team, along with Carla, in getting budgeting as is, and knowing that you can handle that scenario, and if additional dollars come, then that's something that's a positive for all. So that's it.
All right. Thank you very much. Our next item is upcoming meetings and events.
Yes, now this one I did hold on to until the end. And you do have a couple of things to anticipate and look forward to. You've got your Summer Leadership Institute coming up later this week for you as board members to continue your own, development and learning around board leadership. You will have the opportunity to attend a legislative update there, and it'll be very thorough, and you will appreciate being able to do that. June 29th will be the next special board meeting where you have the opportunity then to formally hire your lone finalist, Dr. Kristen Brown. We do have in July, central services and campuses will be closed the week of the 4th of July, and your regular July board meeting is the 24th. And that will be your first time to have a meeting led with your new superintendent.
I'll be there.
I wish you all the best. You're going to have a great future together.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I didn't say, yes, we have anticipated making an adjustment in the time on the meeting of the 29th to accommodate board members' schedules as well. There is only one item on the agenda, so we will move that meeting to 6 p.m. rather than 5:30. And that would be followed by a reception for Dr. Brown here in the administration building.
We'll make it quick. All right. All right. Well, that concludes our business for the evening. It is 8:09 p.m. and we are adjourned.